Today we're going to take a look at the 2011 Christian apologetics video, Horus and Osiris versus Jesus, made by the site tektonics.org, wherein they attempt to refute the claim that Jesus is a copycat of the myth of Osiris and Horus. They state, of all the pagan copycat candidates, Osiris and Horus are the two that look, if any, to be the biggest major threat to Christianity.
Baffling mysteries. Unsolvable crimes. Morgue technicians making queasy faces. These are the cases of Dr. E, medical examiner. Dr. E's workload today begins with one of the most astonishing cases she's ever seen.
This one started out really gross. They brought me this guy's body in something like 15 pieces.
From Plutarch's Moralia, Volume 5, on Isis and Osiris, we see that it is actually 14 parts, and Plutarch says that this is an allegorical number in reference to the number of half the lunar cycle, or 28 days, or the number of days between the full moon and the new moon. Correctly, we know that 14 is actually the number of parts or stars of the Orion constellation, which is represented or symbolic of the god Osiris.
At first I thought they were all decomposing until I realized his skin really was green.
The skin of Osiris was green because in part he was a vegetation god. The Egyptians believing that just as the dead seeds of barley could be scattered about the land and thereafter be regrown via the water from the Nile, so too could the pieces of Osiris be scattered about the land and be resurrected with the help of the water of the Nile.
The victim, the Egyptian deity Osiris, had been cut into pieces by his evil brother Set after being murdered at a party.
Plutarch tells us in section 39 that the story told of the shutting up of Osiris in the chest seems to mean nothing else than the vanishing and disappearance of the water of the Nile, in reference to the annual 150-day Nile flood that is marked by the heliacal rising of the star Sirius. Consequently, they say that the disappearance of Osiris occurred in the month of Athri, meaning November, at the time when, owing to the complete cessation of the Atheism winds, the Nile receded to its lowest level and the land becomes denuded. Hence, the story of Set tricking Osiris into getting into a chest is symbolic of the disappearance of the water of the Nile.
This is perhaps Dr. E's most challenging case to date. Will she be able to solve the mystery of Osiris and bring some peace to his wife Isis and his son Anubis? Or will this case remain unsolved? As the autopsy begins, Dr. E is faced with a shocking turn of events, one that's unlike anything that's ever happened before.
It was crazy. I walked into the morgue, and Osiris's family was there, putting him back together. And I'm like, what is this? I've got a bunch of weirdos in here acting like the victim's body is some kind of a Lego set.
The story the commentator is referring to here is the tale of how in Egyptian mythology Set cut Osiris, shown here, into 14 pieces and scattered his pieces about the land. His lover Isis, aka the star Sirius, tracked down the 14 pieces with the help of the god Anubis, aka the Canis Major constellation, and reassembled his body into that of a mummy, represented here by the Orion constellation in the horizontal or dead position, and through what's called the black rite resurrected his body, into the vertical position, aka the Orion constellation risen. Here we see the astro-theological description of how the Egyptians viewed things. Specifically, on June 25th each year, the star Sirius, aka the dog star, would rise after a disappearance of 70 days. The star Sirius, called the dog star because it is the brightest star of the Canis Major constellation, aka the god Anubis, who is the consort of Isis, who searches for the god Osiris, aka the Orion constellation, who is cut into 14 pieces, aka the number of stars of the Orion constellation, who each November-December on a nightly basis can be seen from Egypt, rising from a dead horizontal position to the standing vertical position. Egyptologists now know that the 3 pyramids are exactly shaped and sized according to the 3 stars of the Orion constellation. And the heliacal rising of Sirius on June 25th is what marks or starts the annual Nile River flood.
But before Dr. E can call the police, something strange happens.
I can't believe it. He's back together again.
Here the narrator is referring to the famous resurrection from the dead of the Egyptian god Osiris, the original dying and rising god, and his son Horus. This model over time was transmitted culturally throughout the world into the form of the Syrian god Nimrod and his son Tammuz, Krishna in India, Attis in Phrygia, Zoroaster in Persia, Dionysus in Greece, Buddha in India, Moses in Canaan, Bacchus in Rome, and eventually through the model of Dionysus Bacchus into the mold of Jesus and Lazarus, as told in the Bible, or Osiris, the Osiris, and his son Jesus, aka Horus, who is a syncretism god of Horus and Osiris.
Except for one piece, and I don't want to be indelicate here, but let's just say he and John Wayne Bobbitt could have started a club.
The narrator here is referring to the 14th piece, that is the missing phallus of the god Osiris, which was replaced by a golden phallus, which Isis affixed to the mummified body of Osiris, and then through what's called the black rite resurrection sex, Isis, in the form of a kite, imparted the ankh, or power of life, into his body and brought him back to life, or resurrected the Orion constellation into the vertical position. Accordingly, all of the pharaohs believed that in order to be reborn into the afterlife, they had to be mummified with a 90-degree phallus, such as was found on King Tut's mummy.
But strangely, Osiris's family then makes an unusual request of Dr. E, and it astonishes her.
If you can believe it, the family tells me they want Osiris declared dead. He's walking around and talking, and they want him declared dead? Unbelievable.
The mystery is explained when Osiris reveals that upon his death he was offered a job as the judge of the dead, contingent upon him being dead.
The narrator here is comically referring to how, after his death and resurrection, Osiris becomes the judge of the dead in the afterlife, in the judgment hall, where when a person dies, Horus, the son of Osiris, leads the dead into the judgment hall where his soul is weighed, and if it is light enough, he goes or is granted access to the afterlife by permission of Osiris. In the Roman recension, this was rescripted into the model that Osiris becomes God the Father, Horus becomes God the Son, Isis and her sister Nephthys become angels, and the person can only achieve everlasting life through Jesus, or belief in Jesus Christ.
Bewildered, Dr. E signs Osiris's death certificate, and the case is closed, with no autopsy.
In section 38, Plutarch tells us that of the stars, Egyptians think that the dog star is the star of Isis, aka the star Sirius, which is the brightest star of the Canis Major constellation, which is representative of the god Anubis, because it is the bringer of water, meaning that the annual heliacal rising of the star Sirius marks the start of the annual Nile 150-day flood. Hence, what was originally an astro-theological model of the Egyptian cosmology, according to which the heliacal rising of Isis, or the star Sirius, the dog star, aka the brightest star of the Canis Major constellation, or the god Anubis, the trusty consort of Isis, who tracks down Osiris, aka the Orion constellation, after he's been cut into 14 pieces, represents the bringer of the water, aka the start of the annual Nile River flood, who in the Roman recension becomes John the Baptist, who baptizes Jesus and is known as a hairy man. And Isis, accordingly, otherwise known as Stella Maris, becomes the Virgin Mary. And Osiris, together with his son Horus, becomes the syncretistic god Horus Osiris, aka Jesus. And the rest is history.
Dr. E closes the case of Osiris with some final thoughts.
You know, this is the first time I've ever had someone walk out of my morgue declared dead. And he actually seemed happy about it. This had to be one of the weirdest cases I've ever had, and I don't see how things can get any weirder.